All right, we're in 1 Samuel chapter number 14. Chapter 14. Last week we did chapters 12 and 13, or maybe it was just chapter 13 last week that we did. But we saw that Saul did have some early success, but we also saw that Samuel told Saul that God was looking for someone who was after God's own heart. And because of some of the things that he had done, he was not doing what he was supposed to be doing as the king. And he had done some things that only the priest was allowed to do. So Samuel rebuked Saul, but here again in this chapter we're going to see Saul does some things, and he's really gotten just ungodly. And as I've shared, about the kings of Israel, out of all the kings they had, there was only about 5 of them that were actually godly kings. All the others were ungodly, led them in the wrong direction. And Saul happens to be one of the ungodly. But we're going to start here in chapter 14, verse 1. Now it came to pass upon a day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said unto the young man that bare his armor, Come and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that's on the other side. But he told not his father. Now, Jonathan was really more godly than what Saul was. He wanted to try his best to do things in the right manner. He wanted God with him, and he didn't want to get ahead of God. So he asked his young man that was his armor bearer to get his armor and come, and they were going to go and see where the Philistines were at. And they were actually going to attack them if the opportunity arose. And Saul tarried in the uttermost part of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree which is in Migron, and the people that were with him were about 600 men. So his father is kind of cooling it under a pomegranate tree. And it says, And Abiah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, wearing an ephod. And the people knew not that Jonathan was gone. So he kind of slipped away unknowingly. But we have Ahiah, who is the high priest. He's the one wearing the ephod at this time. And that ephod had the different stones on it that was a representation of the 12 tribes of Israel. We read about that way back when God shared with them how to make all of the tabernacle, how to set it up and everything about it. And then he shared with them how to make the high priest's dress, what they were going to wear. And that ephod was a part of that. But in all this that was taking place with Saul being under a pomegranate tree, just kind of cooling it, none of them knew that Jonathan had left. And between the passages by which Jonathan sought to go over unto the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp rock on the one side and a sharp rock on the other side, and the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other Seneh. Now, what Jonathan had in mind if the Philistines were in the right place, they could kind of, with just a few men, overtake them, because they'd be going through a narrow passage, and they would be able with just a few men to really take the lives of numerous Philistines. You know, and I thought about this as I was reading this lesson. I love Westerns. And, you know, in Westerns, they like to catch somebody in the passing between mountains or gaps in the mountains. That's where they like to catch them at, and they can do more damage. And that's kind of what Jonathan wanted to do here. You know, sharp rocks on each side. One's called one thing, one's called another. But that's where he wanted to catch the Philistines. The forefront of the one was situate northward over against Michmash, and the other southward over against Gibeah. And Jonathan said to the young man that bears armor, "Come, and let us go over unto the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few." So he's trusting God that it don't matter if it's a huge army or a small army, God's able to do all things. And that's what he's kind of sharing here, is that it don't matter if we're few and they're large or whatever. God's able to take care of it if we just trust him. And that's so true. Even in the day and hour we live in, it doesn't matter how big a problem might look before us, our God's bigger than that problem. So, you know, and that's what Jonathan knew. So he begins to share with his armor bearer that, you know, God's with us. We've got to trust him. Doesn't matter how big an army it is. God can do it with a huge army, or he can do it with a small. Doesn't matter. And his armor bearer said unto him, "Do all that is in thine heart. Turn thee, behold, I am with thee according to thy heart." So he's got an armor bearer that's standing behind him that, "Hey, Jonathan, whatever you think's best, I'm with you." You know, that's really the sign of a good leader. When his followers, those that, even just his armor bearer, "Jonathan, whatever you think's best, that's what I'm doing. I'm behind you. I'm wholeheartedly sold out to what you think we need to do." And one reason is that Jonathan shared with him, you know, it may be that the Lord will work for us. You know, Jonathan knew that God would take care of him. So his armor bearer, "Hey, Jonathan, whatever's in your heart, do that. I'm gonna follow you according to what your heart says." Then said Jonathan, "Behold, we will pass over unto these men, and we will discover ourselves unto them." So they're going to come see where they're at, and he says, then we'll reveal ourselves to them. But we're going to be kind of sneaky about it. We don't want them to know we're here just yet. We're going to see where they're at, what position they're in, and then we'll reveal ourselves. If they say thus unto us, "Tarry until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place, and we will not go up unto them. But if they say thus, Come up unto us, then we will go up, for the Lord hath delivered them into our hand, and this shall be a sign unto us." So, he's kind of, it kind of reminds me of what Gideon did back in the book of Judges when, God was telling him, "I want you to go and take the army, and you're going to go defeat this other army." And, Gideon wanted to make sure it was God. "God, I'm putting out a fleece. Lord, this fleece, if it's dry in the morning and the ground all around it's wet, I'll know. That's the way it was when he got up the next morning. And then he says, God, don't let me trouble you too much. Don't get angry with me, but I'm going to put this fleece out again. That was a light thing for you. But God, can you make this fleece be wet with dew and all the ground around about it be dry? And that's what happened. And he knew that it was God, and he went forward. So here, Jonathan, you know, if they say, Terry, we'll come to you, then we're going to stand still. But if they say, come up unto us, then we will go up, for the Lord hath delivered them into our hand, and this shall be a sign unto us. You know, he was looking for affirmation that this was what God wanted. And, you know, sometimes that's what we need to do. We need to make sure what we're doing is what God would have. And both of them discovered themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, behold, the Hebrews come forth out of holes where they had hid themselves. Because if you remember, the last battle that they had with the Philistines, a lot of the Hebrews ran and hid in caves and holes and anything they could find to hide themselves in. They were afraid. So now the Philistines are making fun of them. Here we got some Hebrews. They finally come up out of their holes and caves and from hiding. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come up to us, and we will show you a thing. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord hath delivered them into the hand of Israel. So, you know, Jonathan didn't know what they were going to say, but he had told his armor bearer, if they say this, we're going to stand still. But if they say this, that's a sign that God's taking care of you. We're going to go after them then. They've said what he shared for them to go ahead and go and take the Philistines. And he's reminding his armor bearer of that. And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, and his armor bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer slew after him. And the first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer made was about 20 men, within, as it were, an half acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow. So they went about destroying at least 20 of the men of the Philistines. They had just made fun of the Hebrews. Here they are coming up out of their holes. They're finally coming out of hiding. But look what happens. God's with them. And they've slain 20 men. And there was a trembling in the host, a panic in the field. And among all the people, the garrison and the spoilers, they also trembled, and the earth quaked. So it was a very great trembling. Now, the Philistines are afraid. They're shaking so, and the earth's trembling. They're scared. Here these Hebrews have come up as they made fun of them out of their holes, and here they are killing them all. And they're afraid of what is about to take place. But Jonathan had won another battle. Jonathan had done something that his father hadn't done. If you remember last week, Jonathan won a battle, and his daddy Saul took credit for it. Well, he's going to do the same thing again. And the watchmen of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went on beating down one another. Then said Saul unto the people that were with him, number now and see who is gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there, his son and his armor bearer. But they were following and trusting God. And God had taken care of them. God had blessed them to win a battle. And Saul said unto Ahiah, who was the high priest, bring hither the ark of God, for the ark of God was at that time with the children of Israel. You know, we read a couple of 2 or 3 weeks ago how that the Philistines had taken that ark at one point, but they were ready to get rid of it. It took them a few years, but they were ready to get it back to whom it belonged to. And now it's still with the children of Israel. Saul wanted it brought forth because, you know, Saul is kind of superstitious, and he thinks just because that Ark of the Covenant is present, that they're going to win anything, don't matter. But that Ark of the Covenant is not what was going to help them win battles. That Ark of the Covenant was not what was going to make them be able to win battles. He was placing his trust in the wrong thing. He needed his trust in God because he's the only one that could help them to win any battle. But he wanted that ark brought out. And it came to pass, while Saul talked unto the priest, that the noise that was in the host of the Philistines went on and increased. And Saul said unto the priest, withdraw thine hand. And Saul and all the people that were with him assembled themselves, and they came to the battle, and behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was a very great discomfiture. So these Philistines, because Jonathan and his armor bearer had trusted God, they were pretty much doing themselves in. Here comes Saul running to the battle with his army, and he finds that this Philistine army is really, they're just doing crazy things. They're doing something unthought of. Moreover, the Hebrews that were with the Philistines before that time, which went up with them into the camp from the country round about, even they also turned to be with the Israelites that were with Saul and Jonathan. So they had a whole slew of Hebrews coming to help with this battle, but the Philistines were pretty much doing themselves in. You know, God can work miracles. God can do the impossible. We saw where they broke a pitcher and began to scream and holler, and how that another army began to run just every direction, shooting arrows and stuff, and they were shooting their own men. If God can cause, if we trust Him, God can cause the impossible to happen. And that's what He had done. Likewise, all the men of Israel, which had hid themselves in Mount Ephraim, when they heard that the Philistines fled, even they also followed hard after them in the battle. Now, you know, here's some, they hear, hey, we're winning the battle, so they run out to kind of get some of that glory too. They run out to kind of get in the back of, we're going to help you out from the back. And that's where they were at. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed over unto Bethaven. So, you know, it continued. And they were wreaking havoc of the Philistines, something they had not done that often. But God was with them, because Jonathan and his armor bearer trusted God. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had adjured or commanded the people, saying, Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening, that I may be avenged on mine enemies. So none of the people tasted any food. How sad. Hey, you know, till we go out to battle and do something, nobody's eating anything. Your soldiers need to eat. They need to be prepared. But he had made a foolish curse. Saul said, Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening. But none of the men present had eaten anything. And all they of the land came to a wood, and there was honey upon the ground. Here's plenty to eat. Honey dripping from the trees. And when the people were coming to the wood, behold, the honey dropped. But no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. They feared what Saul had said, Cursed be the man that eateth anything. Here's honey everywhere. And they don't even dip their hand in it and taste it. But Jonathan heard not when his father charged the people with the oath. Wherefore he put the end of the rod that was in his hand and dipped it in a honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes were enlightened. He was glad that he was taken. Must have been real good. Good honey. I've never been one to eat a whole lot of honey. Now, my brothers and sisters, most all of them would eat it, but I just never could. I wanted syrup. But I never could quite acquire a taste for honey. Tommy, my brother, he'd eat the honeycomb, and he'd chew on that, and he'd eat the honey, and I just could not stand it. So, but here, this honey dripping from the trees, the ground was covered in honey. And all the men couldn't eat anything, but Jonathan hadn't heard what his father said, so he ate some honey. His daddy said, Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening. Then answered one of the people and said, Thy father straitly charged the people with an oath, saying, Cursed be the man that eateth any food this day. And the people were faint. They liked Jonathan more than they liked Saul. They were afraid for Jonathan. Your daddy said, Cursed be the man that eateth anything. Here you have eaten. They're all just so out of, because here Jonathan has eaten. They liked Jonathan. They thought the world of it. He was one that was trying his best to follow God. Saul wasn't. Saul was the king. But could you imagine putting your own son to death for eating? How sad. Then said Jonathan, My father hath troubled the land. See, I pray you, how mine eyes have been enlightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. You know, hey, that honey gave me a little more strength, and you know, it just enlightened me. I'm ready. I'm ready for more battle, if that's what it takes. How much more, if happily the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies which they found. For had there not been now a much greater slaughter among the Philistines? You know, why Jonathan shared, you know, how much happier would everybody have been? How much more ready would everybody have been to have been able to eat some of this honey? Just like he said, it brightened my eyes. I'm ready. How much greater it would have helped all the soldiers had they been able to eat today. In other words, he's pretty much sharing you know, this charge of my daddy is really not a good thing. He pretty much saying that he doesn't agree with what his father had said. And they smote the Philistines that day from Michmash unto Ajalon, and the people were very faint. You know, they battled the Philistines all day. They're hungry. How much more strength they would have had if they could have just taken some of that honey. And the people flew upon the spoil, and took sheep and oxen and calves, and slew them on the ground, and the people did eat them with the blood. Now, you know, that is contrary to what God had shared also. You know, if you remember back in the laws that God gave, God said not to, the blood was the life of an animal. So they ate it with the blood. So, you know, that's contradicting God's law again. Then they told Saul, saying, Behold, the people sin against the Lord in that they eat with the blood. And he said, You have transgressed. Roll a great stone unto me this day. So, you know, Saul's kind of trying to make excuse for it. You're saying you sinned, transgressed? Roll a stone to me today. And Saul said, Disperse yourselves among the people, and say unto them, Bring me hither every man his ox, and every man his sheep, and slay them here, and eat, and sin not against the Lord in eating with the blood. And all the people brought every man his ox with him that night, and slew them there. So, you know, Saul is trying to just kind of sweep that under the rug that they've been eating with the blood, which God told them not to. It's a sin. They shouldn't have done that. And Saul built an altar unto the Lord. The same was the first altar that he built unto the Lord. Now, there's nothing wrong with him building the altar, but he needs to allow the high priest to do the sacrificing. That's what he got in trouble about last week. That's where he sinned, in that he was doing the sacrificing, and you know, he tried to make excuse there with Samuel with different things that went on, and you know, you weren't here, just several different things that he tried to make excuse for. But there's no excuse in sinning against God. None. So Saul built an altar, just like the first altar that he had built unto the Lord. And Saul said, Let us go down after the Philistines by night, and spoil them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, Do whatever seemeth good unto thee. Then said the priest, Let us draw near hither unto God. And you know, that was the right thing to do. The priest said, Hey, you know what? Let's consult God. Let's draw near to God here. And Saul asked counsel or advice of God. Shall I go down after the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he answered him not that day. Now, sometimes it might be like with us. If we don't get an immediate answer from God, we sometimes don't wait on an answer from God. We go do what we want to do. And that's not what God wants. God will answer in His time. We can't pressure God in, hey, God, I only got today. You got to let me know right now. You know, God doesn't work that way. But we can share our petitions with God, and God will answer them in His time. And Saul said, Draw ye near hither, all the chief of the people, and know and see wherein this sin hath been this day. They've sinned. For as the Lord liveth, which saveth Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But there was not a man among all the people that answered him. He's wanting to know, hey, that charge that I made about not eating today, if somebody here is eating, that's a sin. Even if it's my son Jonathan, he's going to die. But all the people there wouldn't answer him because they loved Jonathan. They saw something good in Jonathan. Then said he unto all Israel, Be ye on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. And the people said unto Saul, Do what seemeth good unto thee. They're going to cast lots. Therefore Saul said unto the Lord God of Israel, Give a perfect lot. And Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. And Saul said, Cast lots between me and Jonathan my son, and Jonathan was taken. So the lot fell on Jonathan, and, Saul's decree, nobody can eat. But Jonathan did not hear that decree. Then Saul said to Jonathan, Tell me what thou hast done. And Jonathan told him and said, I did but taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand, and lo, I must die. For just tasting some honey, I've got to die. How sad. Jonathan he's done his best to follow God, but Saul is pretty much out of line. He's out of touch with God. When he was seeking God about whether to continue to follow the Philistines, God didn't answer him all that day. So, Saul is in the bad spot. Saul answered, God do so and more also, for thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. Now, in order to keep his decree, he just going to kill his son for just tasting the honey. Oh, Lord have mercy. How sad. He should have known his men needed to eat. They're battling all day long, fighting a fierce battle. At some point, they need a little nourishment. At some point, they need something to kind of, as Jonathan said, it brightened his eye. They needed something to brighten their eyes. They needed something to lift them up. Kind of like sometimes we get kind of maybe weak or whatever, and we might eat a candy bar or something, kind of get that burst of energy from that candy bar, and we're good to go for a few more hours. That's what his men needed. They needed that extra burst of energy. Jonathan got it from just tasting the honey. But now his father says, hey, you know what? You're going to die. And the people said unto Saul, Shall Jonathan die? Who hath wrought this great salvation in Israel? Jonathan's won the battle. God has used him to spare us from the Philistines. And he's going to have to die? God forbid. As the Lord liveth, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he hath wrought with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan that he died not. You know, the people were thankful for Jonathan. Hey, him and his armor bearer went out with a few men, and they were out here, and they wreaked havoc of the Philistines. He's the one that done that, not Saul. We're going to kill him because he tasted some honey. And, you know, there's so much for Jonathan, we're not going to let a hair of his head be touched. So they took him, and they rescued him that he wouldn't die. Then Saul went up from following the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. Saul, you know, he wanted to win a battle, but he's yet to win one. His son has won a couple of battles, and he's wanting to take credit for it, when he's really done nothing. And we saw in last week's lesson pretty much how God is removing his spirit from Jonathan, or from Saul, because he is going contrary to what God told him to do. That's why Samuel shared, God's looking for somebody that'll be after his own heart. God's looking for another person to be king over Israel. And here in a couple of weeks we're going to see who it is, which we all know, but we're going to read it in Scripture. But he continued after the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So Saul took the kingdom over Israel and fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab and against the children of Ammon, against Edom and against the kings of Zobah and against the Philistines. And whithersoever he turned himself, he vexed them, or he fought with them. So he's just wanting to fight. Anybody and everybody, it don't matter. Now, had the Israelite people done what God told them to do when they went in the promised land, they wouldn't be worried with all these different people. But they didn't do what God said. God said to go in and utterly destroy them. But they'd leave a few here and there. They didn't go up in the mountains and search them out and get rid of all of them. And now they've come back to haunt the Israelites. All these different groups. And he gathered an host and smote the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hands of them that spoiled them. So, you know, he's finally winning a few battles, but now up until about verse 47 or so, he had really not won any battles. His son was winning the battles. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan and Ishuai and Melchishua, and the names of his two daughters were these. The name of the firstborn, Merab, and the name of the younger, Michelle. And the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz, and the name of the captain of his host was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. So, you know, we get kind of a lineage here of Saul. He's got several young'uns, 5, got 3 boys and 2 girls, and we see the name of his wife and what family she came from, and his uncle, son, Abner, was his captain of his host. So, you know, he was keeping it in the family for the higher jobs, but, you know, he's eventually, Jonathan's going to die. He's going to be killed. And Kish was the father of Saul. And Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. So, you know, we get information about his family, and you know, God wanted us to know that for some reason. You know, we're going to see Abner play a part here in a few chapters, and But it's all going to pull together, and we'll see some things, and we're going to see the downfall of Saul, and it's already started. His downfall, the last verse of this chapter. And there was sore war against the Philistines all the days of Saul, and when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him unto him. So they had a lot of hard fighting ahead, and any big fella that he saw, that he thought might be good at fighting and going to battle, he took them. You know, that's what God shared with them. If you want a king, this is what's going to happen. He's going to take your sons and your daughters, and he's going to need them for cooks and servants and in the army and all this kind of stuff. God shared with them really every job that he'd be taking them for. And now we see he's still taking sons of anyone that he thought was a valiant man, a strong man. He was taking them. That's not always the one you need. And we're going to see that shortly. Anybody have anything on these verses or anything in Scripture?